Greetings, boils and ghouls. Welcome back to Midnight Movie Massacre. So it occurred to me recently that I've not really reviewed much in the way of Italian horror on this channel somehow. Absolutely love this stuff. I've done a couple cannibal movies, but I never really got around to laying down reviews for a lot of that shit. And that changes today, with a little movie that I went and picked up way back when I first started collecting splatter movies, and that is House by the Cemetery. This is one of the first ones that I got when I was moving away from just, collecting the franchise shit, because you can only do that for so long. Was pretty pumped on it at the time, but in hindsight, comparing it to other movies, I kind of have a love-hate thing with it. Mostly hate. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the movie, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. House by the Cemetery was written by Dardano Sacchetti and Giorgio Meruzzi. It was directed by Lucio Fulci, of course, and it was released in August of 1981. It's part of a loosely connected trilogy of 3 films with City of the Living Dead and The Beyond, and they're pretty much connected in the sense that, there's this concept of these gates of hell open underneath various towns, unleashing various forms of zombified evil. It's aptly referred to by fans as the Gates of Hell trilogy. It's basically Lucio Fulci's version of Dario Argento's Three Mothers trilogy. Same kind of concept. They're not really connected directly plot-wise, but they have a concept that runs throughout each film. I guess the Argento trilogy does a better job of actually connecting his 3 films with an actual plot element, but I think his trilogy was intentional, and Fulci's might be a fan-dubbed trilogy. He didn't make them to be connected, I don't think. They just have similar themes, so fans said, fuck it, Gates of Hell trilogy. Anyways, basic gist of the plot is this guy and his mentally disturbed wife move into this house in New England with their ugly, annoying little son, Bob, so that he can take over the work that this professor was doing, researching suicide. He's taken this position because as a professor himself, it bumps up his pay grade for some reason. They mention it 3 times in the movie as if it matters. All they gotta do is live at this house for 6 months and continue this dude's research. Turns out the previous professor had killed himself after supposedly killing his mistress, and he wants to get to the bottom of that naturally because they were colleagues, and the dude committed suicide while researching suicide, which, as you can imagine, would be interesting to somebody researching suicide. All the while, a tiny ginger girl who appears to possess some type of clairvoyant abilities keeps trying to warn Bob that his family needs to get out of the house because it's dangerous. Through looking into this guy's research, the professor learns that there was a doctor, a mad scientist-style doctor named Dr. Freudstein, who used to live in this house with his wife, and he was doing all these sort of twisted medical experiments that they don't even fucking bother to explain, and that was what the guy that was researching suicide previous to him started researching, and apparently it drove him mad and he killed himself. Really, it turns out that Dr. Freudstein is still alive in the basement of the house. He killed the previous professor's mistress, and I guess to avoid being murdered by the doctor himself, he decided to commit suicide. So throughout the movie, this fucking Dr. Freudstein zombie creature in the basement is killing some people. He pokes the real estate lady with a fire poker, and he cuts off the babysitter's head, and then proceeds to attack the family. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Plot is not a strong point in this movie. It is a fucking mess. The characters don't make sense. Not a one of them is likable, and there's just an insane amount of inconsistent behavior in this movie. For instance, there's a point where after the Dr. Freudstein zombie kills the real estate agent, the babysitter is fully washing up blood on the floor where he dragged the corpse into the fucking basement, and it kind of makes you think that, oh, maybe she's in on this somehow, she's covering up for it or whatever. The mother fully sees her doing this, doesn't raise any red flags at all for some reason, and she just lets her go about her business, and then after which she ends up getting killed herself, and she's shocked obviously when it's happening, because it turns out, nope, she was just cleaning up the blood because she's a fucking weirdo or something. There's a ton of close-up shots of people's eyes thrown in the movie that seem to be there simply to, fill up the runtime of the bitch, because they last way longer than they need to and really don't lead to anything. The characters, as I mentioned, are all pretty fucking annoying, especially Bob, and all of them seem to be kind of annoyed with each other. The parents show a true distaste for this kid throughout the entire movie. At one point he even goes missing out of their car, and they just kind of stand there looking left and right up the street and stuff. They don't even bother to panic or go looking for him. They end up spotting him in a park or some bullshit, but it's whatever. And then there's a part where where the dude's wife is getting attacked by a bat fucking viciously, and he stands there and watches for like a full 2 minutes before he even tries to fucking help. And it's ridiculous. And the plot just doesn't really make any sense. I mean, they set up all this stuff, and a lot of it just really goes nowhere. The fact that they never explain what kind of experiments this doctor was working on, but he's somehow an undead, like, living zombie. I mean, it just leaves you hanging. You're left to kind of fill in the blanks yourself. And the best way I've heard it interpreted is that he's somehow taking these victims and using them to restore his body. They have this element of him, like, whimpering like a child or something throughout the movie, and then they kind of make it seem like the children are part of this too, but then they never fucking explain that either. There's a random ghost thrown in the end of the movie, like his wife just shows up and takes the kids and they walk off into the fucking sunset, and then that's the end of the movie. And there's some weird nonsensical quote at the end, like, we'll never know if, like, monsters are children or children are monsters or some crap like that. It's just one more thing thrown on the pile to, like, leave you going, okay. Oh yeah, and I guess the ginger girl might be a ghost as well, because why the fuck not? Now, those of you in the know are fully aware of the fact that plot is usually not the strongest element in any Italian horror film. They tend to lean more towards blood and gore and super sexy style. But House by the Cemetery is an especially bad example of plot in an Italian horror film. Usually the plots in them are kind of there to, like, just, you know, be a means to an end to the cool visuals and the violence. But they at least somewhat explain them to the point where the plot feels coherent. That is not the case here. And if that's not bad enough, even when you see a proper cut of the film, it's confusing. But I guess back in the day when it was originally released on video, a bunch of key scenes in the movie were out of order in the edit. Don't know how that happens, but it happened. And I can only imagine how little sense it made watching it on that version. I feel bad for those people back in the 80s, because this movie makes you feel like you lost brain cells even when it's in the proper order. As far as the visuals and the violence go, it's okay. It's nowhere near as cool as the stuff that was in City of the Living Dead or The Beyond, which we will be covering here eventually. It just seems kind of half-assed. The blood is beautiful spurting out of that lady's neck, but none of the kills are really memorable. It's nothing to write home about. The soundtrack is probably the best thing about the movie. And the scene where the lady backs up over the gravestone that's in the front yard, and she just says, "Damn gravestone." That shit always cracks me up. But this is definitely my least favorite movie in the Gates of Hell trilogy, and it might even be my least favorite Fulci movie as far as the ones people consider to be his iconic horror movies. It's not one that I pull out and revisit like on a whim, whereas other ones like Zombie or City of the Living Dead or The Beyond, Black Cat, New York Ripper, of course, stuff like that I watch repeatedly because I actually love the movies. I think this one's a little bit overrated. I think that the violence and the level of, like, splatter in it was probably a big deal back then, and it definitely was a big deal to me when I first bought the movie because I was just getting into this kind of stuff. But the more I look back on it, it's just kind of trash. But it's definitely trash that I'd recommend seeing at least once. In Fulci's defense, as far as the movie being incoherent, he knew the screenplay was shit. Like, when he saw the script, he fucking hated it, I guess, and he thought it was derivative of, I forget which movie, The House That Bled, something like that. But in true Fulci fashion, he just said, fuck it, let's just make it anyways. And you know what? I'm glad that he did. It's not unwatchable or anything. As much as I genuinely kind of dislike the movie, I dislike it in a way that I can laugh at, and I'm happy to have it just simply because I love me some Lucio Fulci. I have a nostalgic spot in my heart for the movie because, as I mentioned, it's one of those first movies I got back in the day when I, like, really set out to collect splatter movies. And as I mentioned, the soundtrack is pretty bumpin'. So definitely get out there, give this movie a look. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this. We're going to be coming at you here real soon, most likely with some more Italian horror. I'm just kind of in the mood for that, and we'll probably be doing some more shot on video stuff as well. Kind of left a loose end where that's concerned, and I definitely want to deliver the reviews that I promised you guys. Upload schedule's been a bit spotty and all over the place, but we're going to dial this into a schedule here real quick, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it.